Welcome to the Westminster tradition, where we unpack lessons for the public service. I'm Alison Lloyd-Wright, Managing Director of the Good Trouble Group and a recovering public servant. And joining me today on Ghana land are my fellow recovering public servants, Caroline Crozer-Barlow.
Hello, Alison.
And Danielle Elston, Managing Director of Good Government Advisory.
Hello, Alison.
So, have you ever been realigned, restructured, reimagined, or some other bullshit word we use when government wants to shuffle things around? Today, we are talking about public sector change management, how to do it, how not to do it, and what actually matters when people and work are involved. So, quick whip around, change management, what comes to mind?
That the word's a lie. It makes it sound like everything stays the same all the time, and then we do change management for a bit and we follow the boxes on a spreadsheet and then we're done and we don't change again. We're always changing. Government is changing every day, all the time, and sometimes it's big and sometimes it's small, sometimes it's administrative, sometimes it's philosophical. But like one of the core competencies or capabilities of public sector leadership and its work is changing. And it's not a special sideline discipline that's in someone's job title and they come in every 3 years and they do it for you.
Yeah, there's like almost a kind of onomatopoeia that's the other way, right? Like, because a principle of change management is kind of being honest and upfront about what the thing is. And then we say this thing, change management, as though it's a distinct and different thing from the rest of our lives. Like there's a kind of contradiction in the words right there. So hard in on that, Danielle. I agree with that.
Me too. And why is it only a leadership capability then, right?
Sure.
If we're all doing change all the time, making it a leadership capability makes it a thing that is done to people rather than a thing that we're all doing and are all a part of. Anyway, that's my first rant. Let's go. Any other further thoughts on change management just as an opening concept?
Look, let's get some of them. We can kind of go through them, but like I do think a couple of them are change managers love change management. Leaders who do it a lot like it. Like once I finish learning something, I want to learn something else and change it. Most people do not share that particular form of crazy, and once they have learned their job and the direction of a government or their CE or manager, they want it to stay like that. We don't really, the people who are interested in change don't really understand people who operate like that well.
Yeah, I find that's a real failure for me because I am kind of constantly interested in I wouldn't frame it as change, but like one of the values that has been in every division I've led is relentless focus on improvement, right? And like if you're genuinely relentlessly focused on improvement, you are always learning, always adapting, and so it doesn't need to be giant, but like change is kind of built into that model. And I always forget how much people are looking for a kind of stable centre around which that is happening. And so, yeah, I really agree. It's a real challenge for some of us.
And I agree as well, as someone who is also interested in reform and change, or else I get bored and naughty.
I guess God, we all share that.
Yeah,
I think
that's another mug.
Dislike,
bored and naughty, another mug.
I think what people dislike isn't even so much that they dislike change; they dislike uncertainty, and a lot of change programs are necessarily uncertain, and or we haven't invested enough time talking about both the why and the how of the change to help people manage that uncertainty.
I think that's so interesting. So because like I always think, and this is one of the things I think about change management, is it pretends there's a single formula, and actually there are different cultures and different teams that will like it. But, you know, my instinct is always, yes, let's be more explicit about the level of uncertainty and why we can't be clear about something. Actually, I think, controversially, that some workforces don't want to be told that there's change coming until actually there's a pretty good sense about the direction of it. And I think, you know, like I think there's something about kind of if you spend your whole time saying, oh, this big thing is coming, it happens near elections, right? The election's coming, everything might change, and people get all very anxious and uncertain, and then actually it usually turns out 99% doesn't.
Well, you just talked about the stable core, right? And something has struck me through that I hadn't thought of before, which is something I didn't have a proper name for, which is when I have to do things in this space, I start with like governments politicians come and go. This is the system we work in. This is the Westminster system. This is your employment arrangements. Like at the end of the day, if you've done a lot of change, the other thing in the public service, is it's not as changey as you think, and you're still going to come to work and all of those types of things. And so the stable centre is the system of government that we don't talk about in my ranty view nearly enough, which is like regardless of whether you are a fisheries expert or a education policy person or whatever else, we're all operating actually in the same government system.
Yeah.
And so when we start changing, whether it's the ICT or the vision or the philosophy or anything else, those things are actually very steady and stable, and that's what should be giving people comfort. But we just don't talk about those bits very much at all because it makes us sound stuck and slow.
Yeah. And the other thing you've written here in our notes, Danielle, is we don't often talk about, we start talking about change in terms of why it's occurring, what the vision is, but the scarier question is changing from what?
Yep. Like we often don't know what we're doing right now, and people in your teams feel like you don't understand as a leader what they're doing. And so you go, we're going to change or whatever, but it's not we're going to go from like blue to green. Like we don't often know what we're doing right now, and we get less interested in it if we know we have to change it anyway. And so like then you have to do change and you have to move functions and humans and do handoffs, but you can't see what you're risking or losing when change happens if you don't know what you're doing right now.
Which is like why it has – oh, sorry, go.
No, go.
It's why it always upsets me when new leaders have a plan for change on day one because you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
I always advise people not to do that. Listening to her, people, listening to her.
Which doesn't mean, by the way, that you shouldn't come in with kind of a broad sense, right? Like, I think I want us to be more responsive to our clients. I think I want us to be felt to be kind of more agile and adaptable. Like, so you go in listening in that way, but you don't go in saying you are not agile and adaptable and you are, like it's kind of, it's a balance.
If you unfurl a graphically designed, this is who we are now on your first day, for instance, say.
I can't imagine anyone would do.
Yeah, here's a New York chart. I think you can go in with a hypothesis that you might seek to test, but I would do that quietly. Let's talk about what drives change and the kind of the scale of change. Dee, you're going to take us through kind of macro, medium and micro change. Give us some examples.
Well, macro is often that kind of change of government, change of minister, sometimes change of CE, MOGs. MOGs are macro. You used to be just about energy, now you're energy and environment, or that's a difference. And in 2018, I led a reimagining of the environment department here. And I will say that working for the CE at the time, he had a genuine interest in bringing everyone with him, and our process was kind of really thorough. And it wasn't a machinery of government shift. It was an incoming government that wanted to focus more on some functions than on others. So it was a restructure. Wasn't about savings. There were savings baked in, but it was actually about we are going to focus. This is what our priorities are now, and this is how we're going to do things. Staff felt it deeply because that is the other thing we forget is mission and values driven in the macro. So I think what happens is in macro change, mission and values driven staff really struggle. In what I will get to in the more micro and medium, it's more process driven staff that struggle. And so like our CEO even ended up in the media for an all-staff email that had a million other things in it. And at one point it said, we're really going to like look at the role the environment can play in economic development. Just using the word economic was enough to have the staff email sent out to the media by various staff, and him having to kind of parse the language of it. So that was the same functions on paper, but a massive kind of cultural shift that required that kind of time with staff on who are we, what are our priorities, and what would it mean to be more like that? How would we have to organise ourselves? Where would we have to put our effort and our resources and our time? And so I think they're the big ones that happen when, I said, big changes of government or big machinery of government changes inside an existing government are those kind of more vision, purpose, who we are and what we're here for. Lots of it will always stay the same. That's the other thing in a macro change, because lots of it will still say the same. School doors.
Yeah, you're still going to have park rangers. Yeah.
And also just in all of them, school doors always open, hospital doors always open.
Yeah.
You can be transforming, reimagining, or whatever else we put over the top of it, but like core functions actually do stay the same. And so you have those macro changes that I would say are policy vision-y type
I
ones
love that.
that impact the whole department.
Yeah.
And it really belts values and mission-driven staff if what you're proposing rubs their values and mission in the wrong way.
Yeah, because it's so 90% of the work stays the same, and then the 10% of discretionary effort goes on different things, right?
Yeah.
And you really, like, I love this distinction of like, this is where the values people come in, because one of the things you really notice in those big changes is that people become very fixated on the loss of what's changing in your 10% discretionary effort, even though it is a very small part of the work. Mm-hmm. And I have come to a sort of view, having done this in a few different agencies, and even done it where the cultural change was not so much we're focusing on different things. Like in my role in education, it wasn't that we were no longer caring about inclusion and support. It was like we're narrowing, like we're getting really tidy about what the 4 things we're going after, and we're just going to do these, and we're going to lose a whole bunch of kind of Christmas tree ornaments that weren't directly focused on our sharp purpose here. When you do that, I think that's a useful barometer for telling whether people will go with you on the journey. And so one of my takeaways from your categorization here, Dee, is like, I really think there's something about in those macro changes, that's the one where you need to be really explicitly putting out the message. It is okay if you don't love our new cultural direction. Like, we've had this conversation, we've talked back and forth about what we're prioritising, what we're not prioritising. If you feel you can't work for an environment department that is doing broadly the same things but is also looking to promote economic development because whatever reason, I don't know, you really believe that that's not appropriate, that's fine. This is not a good place for you to work, right? Like, and I just think like that's one of the things that has really crystallized for me. It's okay to say, if you're not on this journey anymore, that's great. There will be other people on your journey. Go find them. Go play with them.
Which also go back to stable core, right? Which is,
and no one elected you. They elected someone else, and they have a different view.
And that is a part of the stable core.
Yep.
Yes, that's right, that we have to flip. Like, that is part of what keeps us standard, is that we have to keep, and it's not huge, but if that doesn't work for you, there are some governments, by the way, who I couldn't work for, like, to be really explicit. Like, even if they didn't change exactly what I was doing, I would find it very hard to work for because I don't align with the values of what they're doing in the 10% at the edges.
All right, so macro changes. What about medium changes?
Oh, I mean, again, can I just say we're categorising here in a fashion where you could make arguments in different ways. But I think, systems changes and digitisation, depending on how big and deep, changing workflow flows and reporting are those kind of macro changes that are less about that will rub people differently who don't want to do it. They're also, I think, sometimes the ones – I actually think the medium changes are the ones that no one's really that interested in. People like the big – macro and the kind of moving Sally to sit next to John and then having to go to HR about how to sort that out because you've done a desk refit thing. The medium one is the one that everyone's kind of like, oh, because I mean the macro you put effort into change management. The micro it'll usually come and whack you in the face because Sally won't sit next to John. The medium is the one where you don't put the effort in because it's like, is this change? Is this not change? So I think that is, so those medium ones – or I think the other one about the mediums is the ones that don't impact the whole agency or the whole system. Like, I don't know if you think 7 to high school fits that, Caroline, but like other ones where it's like a section of it, you're going to start doing it differently, or you're going to grow. I mean, that's the other thing. We're talking about it all in the kind of borderline negative, which is you need change management when you get a wedge of money and you've got to set up a new division inside an agency and pull staff from other places and all of that kind of thing. That's often a medium change where you get a budget bit up, but you're going to have to get people from other areas, so then they're going to have to backfill and change.
Oh,
and
no one ever thinks about that as a change management, just to say. Like, you've named a category of stuff we don't do. I was thinking, I like that medium description. I was thinking about, we rolled out a new electronic case management system across our allied health workforce, so like 450 FTE, whole new back end of kind of how you're working. And one of the things, when you just said you really undercook it, it's like I thought it was cooked, right? Like I'm like, oh yeah, no, we've kind of done a bit of process mapping and, did all the things right. And then I think the IT vendor came to us and said, you actually need to take a person offline and maybe some more people offline to kind of get in on this change management thing. And it was just like, oh, like, of course I do, right? Because we're taking 450 people and completely changing the way they work.
They have to do during the day. Like,
I know,
what
but
they're
I'd already
typing
spent
on, or
$12 million on the IT vendor. I didn't want to then kind of, like, how was I going to scrape together the budget to get the people offline? And like, I hadn't factored that in the business case. Like, there's a whole kind of learning for me about exactly at that level. We were so pleased to get the money for the thing. I think we really did underestimate exactly how significant that change would be.
And so I guess there's a question here about how much effort we're putting into change management at different levels of scale. That kind of macro usually has a whole change management plan, though I can't say I've ever seen one that I thought was an entire success. The medium ones where we're just kind of doing it and haven't really necessarily conceived of it as change. The micro ones where the people actually care deeply about where they're sitting, which bus stop they have to catch, which building they work in, whether or not they will have bins.
Bring back the bins. I'm still in government buildings every day walking around with a wad of paper trying to figure out where one can do something with it.
But then there's also the kind of the invisible change management, right? Like when there's a new minister or a new chief executive and everyone can kind of sense that there's a shift in direction. Maybe it's fewer briefs, maybe it's more frontline delivery, but for whatever reason, including maybe that the new leader doesn't exactly realise the ways in which they're different from their predecessor, that change is never said out loud or not enough.
That's so true, though. You're right. Like, there are definitely, it's like hard to say out loud. You know that this way of working feels chaotic to an agency that has previously worked in this other way. And like, no one will say that because, like, the direct reports to the CE are all too busy being good and responsive and whatever. Like, oh, that's such a...
Oh, and there's some weird political problem that irritates me at the idea that, like, getting an email... Imagine if every time you're like, this is my 5 top preferences for never using these words. I like whatever. Like, this is how I like to receive my information. And it's like, you can just imagine that making its way into
every time the Mandarin. Yeah.
Like the minister is such a princess. And it's like, oh my God, I would love every minister to come with like when I started, like towards the end of my time in the public sector, I used to then send out when I got new teams and stuff, like, here's who I am. I text a lot. I don't like meetings that have no point. So that it was easier really quickly.
I always did it out loud as well. And now in my new life, I spend a lot of time telling leaders to make their preferences explicit.
Yeah.
About, if I'm texting you at a weird hour, that doesn't mean I need a response. It means I need to get it out of my head. But And I think, though, there's something that could be done. I think not enough leaders spend enough time telling their direct reports what the people above them care about this week and in general, right? So I would always do a kind of fortnightly, here's what the minister is worried about and cares about this fortnight. Here's what the chief executive is worried about and cares about this fortnight. Here's what I am worried about and care about this fortnight. Here's what else we're delivering this fortnight.
Yeah. But isn't one of the reasons we don't do that because people are afraid of saying out loud, your thing is never on the list? Like, just to be clear.
And also you need an authorising environment to do it, right? Like staff sense this sometimes, but you don't always have either enough clarity or permission.
Yeah.
Well, and then they guess, and that's even worse, right? Because then they're like, oh, I think the minister wants us to work in this particular way. And then it's like, oh, no, that's actually not. They would just like the truth, please.
Yeah, exactly. So we've seen good management, we've seen bad change management. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to do as a leader? Why is it so hard to do well? Why is it so hard to get everyone to come on the journey?
I'm going to flip this back to you, Alison, because you made me listen to this podcast about like who moved the cheese, and my brain is just like, I need you to tell me how Who Moved the Cheese, the book, is like the answer to why some leaders find it hard. And that's a meta reflection, not an actual reflection of. Oh, who moved my cheese? Sorry.
I don't know what airport you were in,
lead up,
but like I don't know how you missed this, Caroline. But
in the lead up to doing this episode, I said I would only participate if I got to rag on the book Who Moved My Cheese, or at least recommend to people the If Books Could Kill podcast episode on Who Moved My Cheese, which we will link in the show notes, which was like the go-to management text about change management for at least most of the 80s, but endured, frankly, well into the 2000s and for longer than it ought to have. And has a real characterization that people who dislike change or dislike uncertainty are just lazy and entitled. If I had to summarize the entire book,
and stupid, right? Not forward-looking, not able to game out that their lives will be much better if they.
That's right, and you know, not able to do those 3 chess moves ahead that see that this change is actually advantageous to them in the long term. And gosh, I just hate that book so much. Because
it's not always advantageous,
right? There are winners and losers. There are, and I guess if I had to put in a recommendation for a book that I think does a slightly better job on this, I don't know if either of you two have read The Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, which is a very easy read about change management that goes to the idea that some people do really need like that rational, analytical explanation of what's changing. Some people really need that passion, vision, motivation piece of what's happening, and then both of them need to understand the system that is going to apply the change.
Yeah, and do you know what a big clue will be about which one of those? And so you need to do all of it. But I also, one of my challenges with public sector change management frameworks is that they assume that all public servants are the same and that a department of scientists are going to respond to change in the same way as a department of policy officers and teachers or whatever else. And having done a fair bit of this across a number of disciplines, you do develop characteristics of different types of professions and how they want to do change. So in a shocking development, I tend to find lawyers take a reasonably legalistic approach to change. And yet we get these frameworks and it's like, share your vision, design your thing. And it's like, well, hang on, who have I got? Like, where's the analysis of who I'm changing with instead of the arrogance of like, there's a lot of like arrogance in change management. I know how to do it. I'm a change manager. You're all wrong for not changing in my change management framework. And then a simultaneous like arrogance but lack of courage to just go, there's going to be 30 less jobs. 30 of you are going to lose out. Or
this.
If you are presently a payroll officer, we've got this great new system and it's definitely going to work and we're going to need less of you. Like there's just a lack of courage to say what it might mean as well.
But also I think a lack of inviting people to help design backward from the outcome, right? So one, you want to get to an outcome that everyone agrees on, and that won't always be possible, right? The idea that environment department might have a role in economic growth. Let's say that's the outcome. But then we kind of tell them what we think the steps are to get there without inviting them to be a part of that conversation. Often, not always.
That's the arrogant bit, really, isn't it?
Which is the arrogant bit. And it's like we can't possibly tell them that we're going to change to be a more economically focused agency unless we're clear on what we're going to do differently, because they'll all be so worried about the uncertainty. But at the same time, we haven't invited them to participate in solving the problem with us.
Well, and Tom Loosemore would say we actually don't know what the solution is, right? And that we're actually going to have to build that out as we go through it. And kind of there's something for me about the holding the outcome tightly. And actually, I don't think we should consult on whether or not the Environment Agency is there for economic development, because I kind of do think that's a matter for a minister to decide.
I agree. So hold the outcome tightly. That North Star thing. Hold the bit tightly and then work with them on what getting there looks like.
Yeah. I really think
what's in your control and what's been decided instead of being wishy-washy, and that's the courage bit.
Well, and so what I'd say, so I've done one very big, and I would call it a macro change management, Danielle, the year 7 to high school move, because it impacted literally every public school in the state. So every primary school lost a year and every high school gained a year, and it impacted every corporate services function in the head office and all of the different things. And I would say maybe 3 things made that job easier. 1, it was an election commitment. There was literally no going back on it. It's like, we are doing this. And so as the head of that project, I used to go around to people and I'd be like, you don't need to be convinced on the evidence on this. Like, brackets, I'm not 100% convinced on all the evidence on this either, close brackets, but that's okay because we're doing this, right? So we're doing this. So 1, clarity around North Star. 2, I was asked as we were developing the budget bid for the project team to quantify the inputs, and I pushed really hard against that, really hard. They're like, how much money are you going to need for professional learning to upskill the educators? How much money are you going to need for this bit of change management? How much, like just all of this. And in the end, I sort of made up a number. Didn't really, like I had a science behind the number, but I got a bucket of money. That meant that what we could do is we could go out to all of the schools and say, hey, we have this bucket of money to support change and upskilling and employment. What's most important to you? What's least important to you? How much might this cost? Let's go ahead and do it. And so genuinely, people were excited by the new middle years pedagogy things that we put out into the world, and excited because they had control over the thing that actually mattered to them.
Yes.
And I was not hamstrung by a pre-prepared project plan that said, I will deliver X, Y, and Z. Do you know, I actually think we gave money back at the end of that project because we didn't spend all of it, right? So I just think, 1, North Star, 2, flexible bucket. It wasn't huge. It wasn't everything, but something. And then 3, we had a multi-D. Oh God, I'm doing Tom Loosemore. We had a multi-D team. We had a school person. We had, we had everyone in there, and we just spent our whole time talking to people. Like it was just literally stakeholder engagement, talking, going through the loop of trying to work out, is this good? Is this bad? And we had huge fights along the way. I don't want to pretend it wasn't hard. Like we rezoned the CBD high school. I got a front page picture of how much of a meanie I am. Like all of those things. Nevertheless, I think that process was probably, like the best change management I've been involved in. And a lot of those decisions along the way weren't I don't think I intentionally understood they were going to be as helpful as they were, but they turned out to be really good.
And so can I just draw out there the bucket of money, because what a great advantage to have that not every change project has. In fact, a lot of change projects are about saving money. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that you have to make this change in order to reduce expenditure and don't necessarily have any available funds to help people kind of navigate that change does then become a lot more challenging.
It does.
So what about change resistors? Those people who just don't buy in.
This one I have had much more cause to think about in the last few years with this podcast about robodeath that made me think about it a lot, which is, I would say I probably brought a certain amount of arrogance. It was gone well before we started this podcast, but a bit more arrogance as a change lover and but we're done now, let's do something different. which is that all resistors were kind of, I don't know, the who moved my cheese, because I did actually
mice
read
who
that
were
at the
too
time.
stupid to go and find the new cheese, 100%.
And I won't be so arrogant as to not say that I think I probably started, I think 15 years ago, that was probably my youthful whatever. I don't know if I'm allowed to call myself youthful from 15 years ago, but I will anyway. I think what we see in Robodebt and a few other places, and Post Off a few places, which is resistors are kind of being told that they're grumpy, like, oh, well, don't listen to what they're saying because they're grumpy that they might lose their jobs to digitisation. They don't want to use the new system. They're old and bad at tech. So all these kind of excuses we give, a bit like complainants as well, for why when you're changing, people are trying to tell you things. And in those situations, they were flagging really very real risks, unlawful processes and that kind of thing. And if leaders had listened, it might have changed the outcome. So I think there's a thing, right. And guess what? Sometimes there's just also another list of people who, no matter what you do, like if you give them a better death, like they will resist, and there'll be nothing you can do to make this easier for them. They just will not like change. So there's this massive, like, how do you know what's what, and how do you, and I think it's mainly instinct and listening and that kind of thing. It's all gut instinct as to what it might be. If it sounds rotten, you should definitely have a look, because a bit like, again, Robodebt and other places, people go on leave, new person comes in, they have a look at your job and they're like, oh my God, what's under this rock? What's this? The same thing happens when you move teams around and something gets lost. Oh, didn't that function move? What happened? And all of a sudden stuff does come up. And some of it is the risk that was buried, lost, not malfeasance most of the time. Most of the time it's like we just forgot about it. Let's be real here. But I think like we should be careful about change resistors and labelling them. And I have probably switched to erring on the side of much more listening to check that it's not my, oh, can't believe you don't want a new job, it's so exciting instincts. And my instincts is now to go find the flag, look for the flag.
I have definitely sat down with a team whose project we ended as part of that kind of big rationalisation I was talking about, where we're doing one thing and we ended a big kind of project. And I sat down with them and I'm like, I just need you to tell me all of your worries. Like, this is the safest space about it. Like, tell me what you worry if we end this project. Like, I want to hear it all. Like, I'm not going to judge you for it. Like, I just need you to tell me all your worries. And that was a really useful exercise, because it both, like, you know, it meant we could end that project, but it also kept some of the other things going that were actually we wouldn't have picked up if we hadn't, like, it was, but the key was the safety of the space, of people just being able to actually tell you all of the worries without you arguing with them.
And being able to say, yeah, I can see why that's a worry, and I might take that away and work out how we can. Yeah.
Or I will eat that worry were words I used to say. Like, I will eat the risk. Like, if that comes back, write me an email right now.
I made the decision.
Yep. You write me an email. You tell you, and I promise I will eat that risk, because it's a risk, but it's one I'm making knowingly.
Yeah. Which is the other thing I think about being explicit about. Trade-offs. My favourite.
So true.
My favourite topic.
Back at the same places every time.
We really are at the moment.
We need right, okay, we're going to have to find a way to bring new themes in.
It's true.
But you gotta
I'll set up a TWT change management program.
I look forward to your cheese slide. I think one of the missing things here then is about also just not forgetting the outside world that your government area of government deals with when you're designing your change program.
Oh my God, I was talking to this NGO recently, and they're trying to submit their acquittal report to get their money, right? Like, government outsources a huge amount of its social services, and they don't give you the money to pay the wages. Like, it's a very transactional, some of it's not. Anyway, millions of dollars, and their old contract manager had left, so the email bounces that. They send their report off, which is then tied to them getting their money. They're like, okay, I knew another person, so-and-so worked in that. So I'll send emails to as many people in this agency as I can think of. They're all like, oh, I don't know where that bucket of money moved to. And, oh, did it get mogged? I don't know. Is it still in our agency? And they did everything they could, and no one in the department that had commissioned them for millions of dollars of work could tell them who was holding the bucket and the can and the process of paying them.
Oh, my God.
And we just that doesn't surprise me, really.
No,
and we don't publish directories, which we used to, and we're the absence of landlines and privacy means that we are very hard to interact. Government is very hard to interact with.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily so, in my personal opinion. And you do a bit of change, and then, as I said, you've got an NGO with millions of dollars trying to get paid, and they can't find someone who they don't know who's responsible for them anymore. As an example of the outside world, there's probably billions of examples, but that one jumps to mind.
Oh, my God. That is so embarrassing and just makes government look so bad.
But also I could totally see how that happened. I have no difficulty seeing that from the other side. So Danielle professionally helps people with kind of restructures and some of the IR aspects, as well as some of the kind of structural aspects of change. Talk us through the bits everyone's afraid of, Danielle, IR and employment law, and then how you... And then I want you to take us on a kind of Danielle's best guide to doing this kind of change.
Oh, look, some of it, that would take a long time. But I think there's a couple of things. One of the things is people think that HR and people and culture are managing your IR and your HR risk. They're not. And it's not because they're not doing the right thing, but this is the moment, managers and leaders, where if you have never read your act or any commissioner's determinations, you should do it when you do change. You need to know that anyway, but you really need to know it now. Even just stick it in ChatGPT, they're published documents, and ask for a summary of the consultation agreements. If you don't like wading through industrial instruments, what's wrong with you? But that's okay. Takes all sorts. Stick it in ChatGPT and ask it to explain the consultation parts of the EBA, what triggers a reclassification or timelines for change. We operate in a very structured system, and it is remiss of you, I think, in a leadership sense, if you expect that someone else is going to manage all of that risk for you.
Okay.
You have to, if you are a lazy admin person or haven't hired someone excellent to do it for you, which is even better, you will get unstuck by change, because how you will get legally unstuck by change and process-wise is because of you wrote a new position description, but your old one was 11 years old, and you can't do that because your position description has to be up to date the day before you start change. So you need to know all those things, and the easiest way, if you are in a place, is to make sure that stuff is generally, quite frankly, up to date most of the time, because you are climbing. I took one of the first teams I took in the public service through change was a cut of 60%, so we got rid of 60% of roles. And no one had done the finance or HR move from the MOG 3 years earlier.
Oh, gosh.
So I didn't have a position establishment list or a position description. It was a very hard and fast, first learning of change management in the public sector, because you have to know what you've got now. You need to know what functions you have. You need to know what widgets, that you equip this report every quarter, you fund this. You put out this report to the CE on Fridays. You need to have that list. You need to know who works for you, what their current PD is. You can't have any outstanding IR issues. You can't be halfway through a reclass and then try and do a restructure.
Who's on leave? Who's
on mat leave.
All those things about the mat leave, and that they're always the people who are forgotten, and then they come and bite you in the it bites you in the ass. So you've forgotten them.
And we spend all this
terrible
time on change readiness, and the change readiness is about how to move to the next thing. If you don't have your current thing sorted, which is just everything. I have come across places that have, a year's worth of outstanding timesheets. You will not be able to move that team from one part of the agency to another until you've done them all. So there's just this whole long list of small but unable to be. So the other one that always cracks me up in change is people get a new team and they think they can just go around making new flexible work agreements with people. So I need all my team in on a Wednesday, and it's sure, but these guys have arranged their lives and they have it all written down for the arrangements they have now. So as they expire, Like you could start talking now about what your kind of vision for the team and how it runs is. But how change goes bonkers and off the rails and in tribunals is that kind of degree of arrogance of like, well, I do this and I don't believe in work from home or your people keep working for the last person they worked for a long time after you inherit them or get them in a functional move.
Good point.
Contract management. So this is this whole list of like management kind of hygiene that is what actually unsticks restructural change. It's not the vision. It's not the Westminster ministerial. The unsticking of change is usually because that's the lever angry staff have, is that if you haven't got that bit right, you're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Is probably my summary advice there.
Excellent advice.
Oh, and then you've got to throw in, like we're talking a lot about change and people, nothing better than when you have to figure out how to move the budget, the IT system, like work with your shared services, your payroll, your whatever. Like there's just so much to it. And leaders who are like, I'm sure my business manager is completely across it. You don't need to be micromanaging, but you need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And you need to know where your risks are because it's all about risk. All of this stuff is just risk mitigation.
Which has, I guess, always been one of my positions on machinery of government. I absolutely understand the conceptual desire to reconfigure where things are and who they're with and who they report to. But far out is it a behind-the-scenes mess.
Hot mess.
That is usually like... particularly from some of those smaller parts of government who don't naturally necessarily fit in any one place. They've been mogged in and out of different departments and their back end is like six mogs old.
Yes. Yep, they're getting their IT from the department they were in 4 ago, but their finance from the department they were in 2 ago.
Yeah,
exactly. Definitely seen that.
So that was a good summary on kind of some of the things to think about before initiating your change program. We're going to come back with another episode on getting stuck into that change program, changing in a way that works for people. Until then, any final thoughts, ladies?
I don't know. I feel like so much of our advice at the moment, or so much of our discussion at the moment, could be summarised by the "don't be a dickhead" rule. And I just feel like, in particular, this one feels to me like that.
I actually think I actually disagree. I think it's harder than it looks. And I think we're like desperate to simplify it into 4 boxes with arrows between them so that every leader goes, oh, as long as I follow these 6 who, what, when,
here's
where's.
a checklist. And once I've done this one, I do the next one.
And I just think it's much harder than that, to be really honest.
I agree.
I don't think it's impossible, but I do think it's hard. And I think what boxes you need to tick are going to massively vary depending on what it is you're trying to change.
And the context of it.
Yeah.
So this week's winner of a Westminster Tradition podcast mug is Hannah Moncrief, who engaged with us on putting the radical how into practice. Hope you enjoy your mug and that it is the envy of your coffee room. So that's all for us this time. Till next time.
Just some appropriately bureaucratic disclaimers. While we've tried to be as thorough in our research as busy full-time jobs and lives allow, we definitely don't guarantee that we've got all the details right. Please feel free to email us corrections, episode suggestions or anything else at thewestminstertraditionpod@gmail.com. Thanks to Pampot Audio for our intro and outro music. Till next time.